Good morning, Dr. Ross here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be working with this corrugated polycarbonate roof sheeting, and it's very affordable. It's got a really long life, but the downside is it is brittle and hard to work with. It would like to chip and break and crack. So we're going to be talking about the best ways to cut it and attach it. Project we're working on is our archery range, and we've got this shooting station all set up here. It's a very simple design, open air, got some cross bracing for extra structure, but we're going to put a roof on it. And when you do the corrugated polycarbonate, it's got to have a frame that you can attach it to. And I've got some ideas that I think is going to look pretty clever and sleek. So when we get this all cut and put the rafters on, then we'll be able to attach the corrugated right to it. Okay, so here's how we set up our rafters. Make sure that your front and back wall are parallel. It may not be, but the distance from there to there on both ends. And this is going to be how you'd set up for a flat roof, but also if you had a peaked roof, it'd be the same thing. There's just another wall on the other side. So just set the rafter up here and figure out where you want it. We're going to have ours with 12 inches hanging off the back, and it's going to hang 2.5 feet off the front. So just lay your square across the top of the wall and draw a line right on your rafter right there. And then you lay your square against the back wall and draw your line there. And that's going to be your bird's beak. Draw a line all the way out. And then put the square up against the front of the wall. There you go. And there. And that's where we're going to have them. And we can use this one as a guide to make all of them. Now that I've got my first rafter laid out and cut, I'm going to use it as a pattern. If you keep using a different one, the line can move a lot. So stick with the first one and use that for the pattern for all your rafters. Always check the crown of your board. Every board's bent one way or the other, even if it's just the slightest amount. And when it's up, it's called the crown. And in the case of the roof, where the weight is above, obviously we want the crown to be up. So whatever way the board bends, even just the slightest amount, that will be the crown, and we want that on the top. Now I'll line up my original rafter and use it as a pattern. After laying out the original one and drawing the pattern on, I can still check all these measurements and make sure my lines aren't moving. I'm tapering the end of each rafter by taking out this wedge. And it's 1.5 inches off at that end and tapers out. And I'll reveal that in just a minute. I think it's going to end up being kind of a clever way to make our frame for our corrugated roofing. All right, I'm going to put my rafters on 2-foot centers across the top. And so I've got 6 with bird beaks cut in them. And then I've made 2 more without bird beaks because I'm going to have an overhang a little bit on each side. And then I've got front and rear pieces that are going to go on the fascia. So in a minute, we're going to be able to reveal how those are going to hang out there, and we're going to make the frame to put the polycarbonate roofing on. First, I need to figure out how much overhang I've got on each side of the roof. And what I'd like to do is think ahead about how these polycarbonate panels will come out with the correct amount of overlap on each one without having to cut one long ways. So what's easiest for me is I'm going to go ahead and just lay them out and measure it. This shows how brittle this stuff is if you're rough with it. I think I busted this getting it out of the rack at Home Depot or loading it on my trailer. But I'm just going to make this under one of the seams. But you do have to be careful handling it. All right, they're saying these measure 26 inches. It's a little less by my tape measure, but I think what'll happen is when you push it down, you know, you'll get the full width out of it. And when you overlap it, it looks like you'd lose about 2 inches. So that means each panel has 24 inches exposed. So if each panel is overlapping 2 inches and the end panel still has that 2 inches exposed, then I would need to make my frame on my roof 12 feet and 2 inches if I don't want to have to cut one all the way up the side. I've cut my fascia boards for 12 feet. So I'm going to have a 1 inch overhang on each side. Hopefully that looks nice. All right, I've laid out on the top of the walls where these go to be equally separated. It's not exactly 24-inch centers, but I'd rather have the spacing even. Okay, here's a fun trick I have for you if you're working alone. I'm going to put this fascia board up, and so on the far rafter I've nailed a piece of scrap. I got a piece of scrap temporarily attached. So since I don't have a helper, I can just lift it up, set that end on there, and climb up the ladder with this end. I figured out how much overhang I have on each end and marked it on the board. So I'm all ready to line it up. Now here's where that little angle I put on the end of the rafters is going to come in. I'm going to use a spacer of this framing that we're putting under the corrugated plastic, polycarbonate I should say. And so what I'm going to do is hold this fascia board up the thickness of this so that when I get done with the frame, it'll all set down inside the fascia board and there won't be any gap underneath the corrugated roofing. So let's see how that works. Well, I ended up wishing that I had started some screws in my fascia board, but I got that lined up perfectly. We can actually use the angle of our screws to pull up or down to try to line it up. But now when I put these stickers across the rafters, they'll sit down inside the fascia. Okay, I've added my scrap wood helping hand on the back fascia board there. So now we're ready to put up the last one of these. Let's hope it fits right in. The nice thing about this helper is he doesn't have any of his own ideas, and he doesn't cost very much per hour. All right, so here's the grid that I'm going to screw the plastic corrugated down to. And what I thought was unique was the fact that I was able to get it recessed under. Otherwise, if the lath was sitting on top of the rafters, there would be an air gap between the roofing and the rafters. And this is going to get everything down clean on top. All right, so it comes down to the original question is, what is the best way to cut this polycarbonate or plastic corrugated roofing? So this is one of my favorite tools. I could nibble along with a fine blade, like a metal cutting blade with this. These are very versatile and handy. Obviously, some people are going to say put the blade in the skill saw backwards, or maybe even a fine blade on a jigsaw like this. I'm going to try to cut all 6 pieces at once with my grinder with the fine cutting wheel on it. And I'm going to use the guard here, and I'm just going to set it against the fence and see if I can keep a straight line and cut all 6 pieces at once. I guess if there was one problem, other than chipping the material, it would be getting a melting factor so that the edge is really bad. So we're going to give it a try. The ankle grinder is definitely melting it. We'll try with the nibbler. You can get a big arced blade for this. Looks more like half of a skill saw blade. I just don't have one with me. Okay, so the angle grinder did cause a melting effect and got some bad parts of it with that. But the multi-tool was definitely the ticket. If I work with this stuff again, I'll get the other blade for the multi-tool that's got the half round. It's got a lot larger area and a very fine tooth. What it did leave is some crusties on the end, but you can easily pick away with those. Well, I may just have gotten lucky, but I'm glad to see that the roof is almost perfectly square. Yeah, it was probably a happy accident. So I'm working with this poly corrugated roofing, and it comes in a variety of colors. I picked this, I think it's called Castle Gray, but it's kind of a brownish charcoal look. Also, I bought the fasteners that were the same brand that came with it, and it's really high quality, although you could probably use anything. It's going really, really well. This stuff is super slick to put on. What I found is to make sure that you put the fasteners in and don't over tighten them. Make sure they're not angled. You want to go straight in, and make sure you have the screw right in the bottom of the valley so that we're not picking up any of the ridge on either side to try to break it or bend it. And then just go down until the rubber begins to smash. If you get it too tight, you can back it up a little bit. Well, there you go. That turned out pretty cool. And you know, that corrugated poly sheet roofing, it's actually a dream to work with. Recently, we did a project with corrugated metal. You remember that? It was the luxury shed. And if you don't remember or you didn't see that video, I'm going to go ahead and put a link down here to it. That video had a whole bunch of construction tips and other shenanigans and even some electrical stuff. So if you didn't get to see the luxury shed, check out the description and look at that one. We used corrugated metal on that, and we used the poly on this one. It was much lighter and really easy to work with. Matter of fact, the most trouble I had with it was getting it home. Transporting it turned out to be the biggest challenge for me. But cutting it and putting it on was actually a breeze. I'll use it again. And it was fun having you along with me. Thanks, and if you enjoyed it, please hit that like button, subscribe, share this with others so more people can join the fun, and I'll see you in the next video.